The Friday Morning Rando.
Greetings and welcome to the Friday Morning Nameless. I'm Chad the Alcoholic, and jeepers. And so today I have a very special guest. It's actually the first time I've ever had an interview. I've ever hosted an interview on my channel. Oh my goodness. So as you can see, I know exactly what I'm doing. Um, so today we have a very special guest, very notorious lurker, um, known as Neal, who has decided to unlurkify himself, if that's even a word. Um, uh, so yes. So Neal, welcome.
Thank you, Chad.
How does it feel to be the first a first official guest on the Friday Morning Nameless?
I'm honored. Yeah. And we started talking about a week ago. I've been lurking and posting comments for about a year. And but it seemed to me like you were the right person to start with. And the reason for that is, well, I said you were earnest, but I meant that in every sense of the word. You had to, throughout everything I've seen in the corner, you're always looking at everything you're doing or you're interpreting or it's, and I said this to you over email, it's that desire to take the beam out of your own eye first. And when Peterson talks about put yourself in perfect order before you try to change the world, that sort of mentality. And I saw that with you in spades. And yeah. So here I am.
That's what I try. I tried to aim at doing. However, there are moments where obviously I fail, but it's okay. So I mean, so this is I think the reason why I wanted to start doing these conversations was that for me, what Paul Vanderclay does with the Randos conversations is probably the most valuable internet artifacts that we have available. Some of, and 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 I'm a terrible listener, so I figured it'd be a good time to start trying to uh, practice that, and by listening to other people share their stories. And what I mean by a terrible listener is I don't know how to interview people very well. Like I can talk about myself literally all the time, but I just ugh. So, but you're a great dude to do this with because I know we have kind of a similar progression through the TLC, this little corner of the internet, and I've noticed a few different people. Similar stories are popping up, and I think that they are very important, and I think they are those stories that I've heard, yours included. There is an earnestness about those stories, and I think they're not like this. You have to do this. It's like, no, this is just my story. This is what happened, and I think, and although it's kind of out of my hands, I think that it would be wise to share that story with other people. And so you're the perfect guy to start this with. So just before we get to like some of your overall story, I'd like to, if you want to give me a little bit of a picture of your how you found this internet space.
It was through Sam Harris. It was the Sam Harris to Peterson to everything else pipeline. But maybe I could even start and just go back and do the PVK thing, which is talk about my upbringing, all that stuff. So I was born in New Jersey. I grew up in a town called Edison, New Jersey, and went to church every Sunday, Presbyterian, raised Presbyterian, which is part of the main line. and I liked church. Well, I shouldn't say that. I liked the idea of church and the idea of God and the idea of Jesus, but I didn't like actually going to church because it was quite boring. But it definitely planted plenty of seeds in me. And I grew up in a great family. My parents were phenomenal, extraordinarily grateful for my parents. I was kind of an only child in that both my parents were married before they married each other. And my father had a son 10 years older than me. And I only saw him every other weekend for about the first 7 or 8 years of my life. But then he went off to college. And so I didn't get to see him that much. And but I also have a younger brother 10 years younger than me, so kind of a strange family. So I was basically an only child for 10 years, but then my younger brother came along. And so but especially I think a significant precipitating event for me was 9/11, because I grew up in New Jersey. I didn't know anyone personally who died in 9/11, but there were kids in my high school who lost parents, lost family. We have a 9/11 memorial in my high school. Um, and I remember the conventional wisdom. I was 16 at the time. I remember the conventional wisdom was, oh, they're just crazy, they're cowardly. And I was like, no, they're not cowardly. And then that's when I read Sam Harris's The End of Faith. And the point that book makes, I think, very well is that nope, they genuinely believed that they were going to heaven. And not only that, even further, they believed that they were doing the right thing. And then so if they believed that they were doing the right thing, what makes me so sure that I'm, let's say, my God is the correct God, or my faith is the right faith. And so also at that time, one thing that Edison is known for is that it has the highest per capita percentage of Indian Americans, or Indians from India, of any place, I think any place on earth outside of India. Like when I was growing up, it was something like 30 to 40% Indian. And I think it's now more like 50 to 60%. And my neighborhood was, I would say, more than that. Like it was probably 50% Indian. And all the smartest kids in my classes were Indian, like all of them, brilliant. And all my best friends were Indian. And so it was things where Jesus would say stuff like, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. And I would, so that really bothered me, because I'm like, I have Hindu, my best friends are Hindu, like they can't find God, or they can't find peace or joy or love or happiness, or it's no. So that all that stuff kind of undermined my, very, young faith, I would say, at that time. And then going to college, that just gave me, like, all those things that I just mentioned gave me the excuse to do exactly what I wanted in college. And probably the most important part of my college experience was I joined a fraternity, much to my surprise. But I basically, I went to, I'll tell you the story. I was bouncing a foosball. So first of all, my best friend and I, we were best friends in high school. We went to the same college. We both went to Rutgers. And we roomed freshman year, and everybody said, oh, you can't room with your best friend because you're going to hate each other. And it's like, not at all. Like, we talked till like 4 a.m. It was awesome. It was almost too awesome, because we were so provincial. Like, we didn't want to get out and talk to other people. And this was maybe a week into it, I was bouncing a foosball on my floor, and these two girls came, like, knocked on our door, and they're like, what the heck is that sound? I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing this football. And they're like, and we started talking, and they said, oh, let's do you want to come with us to a party down the street? And we said, okay. So later that night, or the next day, we went to party, and then went back to that same house a week later, and went to another party, and really liked the guys there. Just an eclectic mix of very strange guys. And after the second party, they were like, oh, by the way, we're a fraternity, would you like to join? It was like 9 guys. And I was like, yeah. And there was no pledging. It was just join a fraternity. And my best friend, his parents were like traditional Russian, and they looked at this like rinky dink house and a lack of a structure, and they're like, we're not letting you join this thing. But I I did. And but that experience, I probably learned more as a result of that during college than I did any of my college classes, just how to relate to people, how to um what was interesting is I didn't even realize this until after or as I was joining. The fraternity I joined is a historically Jewish fraternity. It's called ZBT, and so half the people in there were Gentile, half Jew, and so we would go, like, it's not all the time, but we would go to the Abad house on Friday night, and the rabbi would give toasts, and we were all drinking wine, and it's like religious freedom, great, but it was just a fun time. And but that fraternity experience, it really helped me understand what brotherhood could be and was, and so that was the positive side of it. But obviously there's the immature, there's the hey, we can do whatever we want side of it. And but it gave, the undermining of my faith during the with Sam Harris, with those other things I mentioned, it gave me the excuse I needed to just basically let wild in college. And you know it was not, I'm not proud of the things I did, I'll put it that way. And the so coming out of college, got a job, and moved out of the state to Wisconsin, actually, your neck of the woods.
Oh,
And yep. And don't want to give too much away there, but um and then I traveled a lot for that job. I traveled maybe 30 40 weeks of the year. And that's how I met my wife, because she was working down in New Orleans, down in Louisiana, and she was part of the team on the vendor side. And so what happened was, after the go live, the big event, my wife invited like the whole team out, and she's like, "Hey, we should go celebrate." And little did I know, she did that like every Wednesday, and it was always, she was always hanging out at this bar and restaurant, and I was the only guy who showed up. And I had this thought in my mind that she thought I was a stick in the mud, because I was I was perpetually, like, I was always prim and proper on every call, and I want in every meeting, and every interaction with her. And so I wanted her to know that I was not a stick in the mud. So I show up at this place wearing a tank top with like full tattoos on both arms. And what's ironic about it is that you can't get into that bar and restaurant with a tank top. Like they won't let you in, like, or with so she had to buy a shirt for me such that I was able to get into the restaurant or
is
the
this
bar. And what
the
was that?
the foreshadowing of the not yet girlfriend buying you a T-shirt that would eventually be your wife, who would also now buy your shirts?
It was definitely no. It was definitely a good start. No, I'm like the simplest dresser you can imagine. It's like simple
Me,
black. But yeah,
and my wife buys all of my clothes except these ones.
except
These are little stuff. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah, that's the Petersonian look, the orange tie. I definitely recognize the tie. Um, the okay, so yeah, so then over the course of about 2 years, I used up all my hotel points and airline miles that I accumulated. And either she'd fly up to Wisconsin more so in the summer, and then I'd fly down to New Orleans more so in the winter. And so then after, yeah, so we got engaged, got married, moved to or actually so before that, I went to my company and said, "Hey, I love what I do, but I've got to go to," oh, no, sorry, got married, she moved to Wisconsin, and then she's pregnant with our child, with our daughter. And I said to my company, "Hey, I love what I do, but her parents were going to be our daycare, and so I've got to move down. I'm going to move down to New Orleans." And fortunately, I was able to continue working and move down to New Orleans. And but we live in the suburbs of New Orleans. And I should mention that, yeah, this is important, that my wife's Catholic. Her whole family's raised Catholic. And when we were initially having the conversations about that, she said, "Oh, my faith's important to me. It's personal to me," and she wanted to make sure our children were raised Catholic. But She put absolutely no pressure on me whatsoever to convert, or to her, it was very personal. And it seemed, I learned a lot from her in that, just in that kind of attitude of, it was almost like it's not up to her to try to change me, or yeah, it was. And um but I had no issue with raising our children, if Catholic, because I said, I enjoyed and appreciated my Christian upbringing. I thought it was a good upbringing, um so that was fine with me. But I had zero expectation for conversion, and to me, I was very much in the secular materialist mode. I was very much in the, oh yeah, yeah, before we had science and before we actually understood the world and how things work, it made sense that we had superstitions, and it made sense that this and this and this. And so I was very much in that mindset. And there were a number of things that also undermine. It's a great YouTube series. There's a guy named Evidence, but it's a 3 instead of an E for, but and this is an old series, but he went through step by step. He grew up in like a evangelical fundamentalist Christian background, and he went through step by step like what undermined his faith over time, and is phenomenal YouTube series. Like one of the first things I watched on YouTube, I think in my early 20s. But anyway, so we got married and moved to the New Orleans area. And then we had our daughter. And so a combination of things happened. It was kind of like the perfect storm in my life. So one was that I was no longer climbing the corporate hierarchy. Like before I was working 60 hours a week. I was, I defined myself based on my work, and I was doing really well, and I was well respected and all those things. And then I by moving to a different location, still doing the same kind of work, but I was like 40 hours a week, assigned to one client, not talking with a lot of other people. And also I had no friends and no like other people I knew in the area. And then simultaneously, after our child, after a baby, relationship changed. And, Peterson talks about, well, if you're feeling resentment, then you're either, immature or you're being taken advantage of. And there was a lot of growing up that I had to do, but because I was so used to being the center of attention. Oh man, I loved being the center of attention. And vanity, like there's a scene in Devil's Advocate where he's like, vanity, definitely my favorite sin. And oh man, that's me in a nutshell. And okay, so our relationship changes. We're not nearly as close as we were prior to the baby. Trump gets elected. That throws a wrinkle in everything. All these things happen. Like, and I don't have friends and family in the area where I really don't have. Yeah, I was adrift, I guess you could say. And it was like, what's the whole purpose of my life? And at the time, I was listening to Sam Harris's Waking Up podcast. Now it's called Making Sense, but it was Waking Up back then. And he had this guy, and I looked up my dates just to make sure I got this right. It was January of 2017. The podcast episode was called "What Is Truth," and he had this guy I'd never heard of before on, and the guy was named Jordan Peterson. Never heard of this guy, and I listened to them for 2 hours, and I was like, "This is the dumbest conversation that I've ever heard on Sam Harris's podcast." It was so dumb. It was infuriatingly dumb. And I was like, they couldn't agree on and every time Peterson talked, I was like, no, he's talking about wisdom. That's what he's talking. He's talking about wisdom. And they just went round and round for 2 hours on like, what is truth? And after the conversation, I was like, okay, something's not adding up. There's gotta be something more to this Peterson guy. Like this can't be it. So then I looked up Peterson, and I found his Rogan conversation, which was maybe a week or two before this. And I listened to that conversation. That was his first Rogan conversation. And that gripped me. Like that had me something fierce after that. Like I had never encountered someone like this before. And it took me a while to figure out what made Peterson so compelling, but we'll get to that. Okay. So I find Peterson. I start devouring everything, Peterson's got right around that time. And then I looked up the dates for this too. So that was January of 2017. May of 2017, he starts the Genesis series. And so by then I've had like 3 months of runway with Peterson. Like I really I get where he's come from. And then he goes into Genesis and he approaches it more humbly, more. So here's what I ultimately realized he was doing. He was going bottom up versus top down. Peterson's bottom up all the way. I know PVK talks about this all the time now, but that's really the brilliance that made Peterson. He goes bottom up all the way. But not only that, he was bottom up and he was stitching together psychology, philosophy, neuroscience, man, all these disparate fields, child, and he's just weaving together, like building from the bottom up. And it was, and okay, so, and around this time, I'm still in the mode of like, I'm gonna solve all my problems. I'm like, I bought like 4 self-help books on like improving, let's say, marriage and intimacy and all that. And I'm like, I'm gonna fix it. Like I could fix everything. and and like and at the same time I'm lonelier and I don't have friends in the area, and I'm just kind of becoming more and more resentful on things that, and I realize in retrospect that like God is preparing me. He's preparing me. And also around this time, I've got my older brother, 10 years older than me. So I got to tell you about him a little bit. So one of the smartest people I've ever known. He was the lead programmer for Vonage for a few years. So Vonage was the first company to do voice over internet. He came in second in the Math Olympiad in New Jersey in high school. And he was contemplating going for a PhD in math, but he just didn't have the patience for it. But the problem was he would work at a place and he would have this sense of arrogance, like he was smarter or knew better than all his superiors. And he probably did, and in a large extent, but it didn't matter because he came across as just arrogant and my father would be on him constantly and say, hey, you gotta, and simultaneously, like he drank heavily every day, chain smoked, like he did not take care of himself at all. My father would just be on his case, like you got to go to the dentist, you got to get doctor's appointments, you got to and at that time I knew he was not doing well, and I hadn't talked to him since my wedding, and that was maybe 2 years prior. But in my mind I was thinking to myself, like, he's my older brother, he's 10 years older than me, I only saw him every other weekend. And that was also during that time I was listening to the Genesis lectures, Cain and Abel. And then I get home, this is early November of 2017. I get home from a business trip and I look at my phone. My mother's texted me, and she texts me and she says, I won't give his name, but my brother's dead, with an exclamation. So this is my father's son. So not related to my mother. My mother texts me. And I've only been in this situation twice in my life, but you learn something about yourself and how you respond to extreme duress, I'll say. And the way I respond to extreme duress is I have to go number 2, bad. And it's just, and so I'm driving home from the airport and I have to, like, it's gonna just, I have to go. I'm just racing home. And I get back home and I get to my house and I go to the bathroom, and just diarrhea, filth just comes pouring out of me. And my father calls me and tells me that his firstborn son is dead. And all I have in my mind as that's happening is, Cain, am I my brother's keeper? That's all I have in my mind as that's happening. And so that phrase am I my brother's keeper? That echoed with me for days, like days afterwards. Okay, a couple weeks go by. My wife and I and our daughter have to attend a wedding in Texas. So we're in Texas, and it's a Catholic wedding, and it's one of her friends from college. And I was at that point, I was used to going to masses for like Easter, Christmas. It's like, yeah, no big deal. I would go up and do this, and the priest would give you a blessing, and that's it. And I was used to playing the part and being the supportive husband. And so I don't know exactly when it happened. I don't know exactly when it was in the mass. I don't know if it was lasted 5 minutes or 30 minutes. I don't know. But at some point in the mass, I turn to my left where I'm looking at my wife. And our daughter's about a year and a half old at that point. She's asleep on my wife's shoulder. And my wife is just holding her peacefully. And it's perfect. Like that moment in time is perfect. Everything is so beautiful. And I don't mean beautiful from an aesthetic standpoint, but that's true too. It was beautiful from an aesthetic standpoint because my wife's a beautiful woman. But the moment in time was perfect. It was like that one moment was perfect. And because you had my daughter perfectly peacefully asleep on my wife's shoulder, my wife peacefully, just focused on the mass. And I was just, okay. So, and then suddenly I had this feeling come over me. And I wrote down right, shortly after I wrote down this because I was like, I got to remember this properly. The way I would describe it, the feeling, excuse me, the way I would describe it is you're listening to your favorite music, and at the highest point of the music, the crescendo, every hair on your body is like standing on end. Peterson talks about this piloerection, right? That's the closest approximation to this feeling, except this feeling lasted 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30. I don't know how long it lasted. And the feeling did not say anything to me directly, but the effect that the feeling had was, this is it. This is it. What the effect that it had on me was like, Neal, if you care about anything, like if you care about anything at all in your life, anything, you pay attention right now. You pay attention. And it was loving and tough at the same time. It was like this is it. That's the best way I can express it, is like, this is it. This. And I know I've tried LSD, I've tried psilocybin mushrooms. I was completely sober in this church. Those things were interesting. They were not like this. They were not like this. And so my reaction was, all right, I'm here. I'm here. Like whatever's happening, I'm here. So it progresses through the mass. We get to the point where we have to go up for the Eucharist, and I play my part. I go my wife to my left, and then I follow her. And as I'm standing up, we're lining up in that line straight ahead, and I see Christ on the crucifix above the priest and above the altar. And for the first time in my life, I really wanted to partake for the first time in my life. Never. And so I'm getting closer, and I'm getting closer, and I'm getting closer, and the feeling is still there. The feeling is justice. It's not any stronger. It's not any weaker. It's just there. It's just holding. It's just hanging out. And I'm like fully present in the moment. And so I get up to the front. I get up to the priest, and I do. Here, I'll stand up for this. So I go like this, and I turn away. And while the priest blesses me, and I turn away, And the moment I turn away, I'll put my camera down again. So this is the crazy part. So the moment I turn away, the feeling fades. The feeling disappears from me. Except this is really obscure. And I've told this story a few times, and no one ever knows what I'm talking about here. So maybe someone in the audience will know what I'm talking about. So my favorite science fiction show when I was a kid is this. It's the most underrated science fiction show of all time, in my opinion. It's called Babylon 5. It's so good. Babylon 5 is so good. And it's about a space station. There's a captain, there's a war, and I won't spoil it too much. But the reason I bring it up, okay, so in that show, there's one episode where they need to smuggle out information from Earth because Earth is in a lockdown, and there's like a priest, a rabbi, there's like a pastor, a rabbi, a Muslim leader, and they smuggle out like these messages, or like USB basically in a crystal, but they smuggle it out like in a Bible. And anyway, so later on in that episode, the pastor is talking to the captain, and the captain is like, he's struggling, man. Like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. It's the galaxy really. And because they're in the middle of the war, and he's trying to grapple all these things. And at one and the captain's talking to the pastor, and the captain kind of says, smart ass to the pastor. He's like, oh, so you just want me to turn all my problems over to God now, don't you? And the pastor leans in, and he looks the captain in the eye, and he says, when God comes calling, you're not going to need me or anybody else to tell you what that sound is. And so that scene from that show, the moment I turn away, it's not like that scene casually just like, oh, it just popped into my head. No. Like that scene in that show, the moment I turn away and the feeling leaves me, that scene in that show burns itself. Like it's like bam. And all I'm thinking after this is happening, all I'm thinking is, what the fuck? Like that's literally what I'm thinking. Cause I'm like if you told Neal the day before that this was yes, yeah, exactly. If you told me that morning that such an experience was possible without drugs, I would have said, there is no way in hell.
Right.
I would have said, not possible. It's straight. So
into that church the moment before. Yeah, dude.
Okay. So right after, this is funny, right? So this is the skeptic in me. So right after we get back to our pew, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, this is the skeptic me. I'm like, okay, at the very least, I just experienced a profound psychological event.
Psychologically speaking.
Yes. Yeah. So in retrospect, it's just funny. But okay, so no, but in some way, okay, in some ways, I credit that Neal in that moment, because that was a humble Neal. It was like, I have no idea what this is. Like, right. I have no idea. And so for several days afterwards, I was like, okay, what do I? And I said to my wife at the time, I'm like, I think I just experienced I think I just had a religious experience. That's what I said to her at the time. And she's like, okay, great. Like she's like, she was very just okay. And it's like she's that gentle traveler, just kind of walking on someone's journey, and just being there. And so as the days go by, I'm like, all right. So I have this Petersonian foundation with Genesis, and I have this religious experience. I'm like, okay, what I need to do is I need to go back to all of the things that initially dissuaded me from my faith. I need to go back and I need to reread The End of Faith. I need to I need to rewatch that series from Evidence, all that stuff. And so I did that. And I had this tiny kernel of faith, and it was still there after doing that. And I'm like, you know what? They're not hitting they're not hitting it on the bullseye. You know, they're the problem is all these things that undermine the faith. They all attack the Old Testament and the Old Testament God. No, 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 no. So I was like, I need to find the best arguments there are out there against Jesus. And it's hard. It's hard to find. There's not much that attacks Jesus. It's hard to find. But wait, got it. Okay, so I found this book. It's called The Bad Jesus by Hector Avalos, right? He's a pretty famous biblical scholar. And okay, so when I bought this, I was terrified to read this book. I was so scared because I have this nascent baby faith, this tiniest baby faith, and I'm like, oh, what if this thing demolishes my total because I was holding on to like so little there. And so I read through the first chapter and I'm like, eh. And then I read through the second chapter and I'm like, eh. And I read through a third chapter and I'm like, nah. And I keep reading and I find my faith growing every chapter of this thing. So I want to thank Hector Avalos. I really do. It was exactly what I needed.
That's classic.
Okay. Sorry, we gotta go back.
It's like a negative space apologetics or something. It's like, or apophatic apologetics, where it's like, we're gonna destroy the Christians. Meanwhile, it's like, yeah, but you're just playing against my ego, and the like the part of us that, because I think ego, whatever that is, maybe that's just spirit. It's God given, so it's not all bad, right?
Yep. No. Yeah. No. Exactly. And then when I had that, I was like, okay. I went through a period where I thought to myself, okay, maybe it's only necessary to believe in the idea of God. Like maybe I'm one of those secular materialists that can look at Christianity and be grateful for Christianity and say like, oh, that's necessary for the normal person, but Neal, I'm special, and the normal people need that, but and every time I did that, every time I started believing in the idea of God versus believing in God, it was like God saying, no, 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 no. Like my depression would just roar back. Like it just came back in force, like every time I started down that road. And I'm like, okay. So, right around that time, December of 2017, I started having all these thoughts, coming to me like crazy. And, as I'm rereading stuff, and I'm like, okay, so I deconstructed my deconstruction. So now I need to start figuring out what I believe. And I didn't think of it that way, that I was deconstructing my deconstruction, but that's really what I was doing. And so I started writing stuff, and I started piecing together like what I believed and why. And I was basically writing out my testimony. I was writing out like, here's where I was, and then here's what happened, and then here's now what I believe. And just that process of like being forced to write about it was refining and helping me understand what I genuinely believed and why. And then my wife's aunt and uncle invited me to a retreat in May of 2018. And that retreat, you're not supposed to talk about it, but I'll just mention one thing. So, well, I'll mention two things. So there was a part of that retreat where it's laying of hands, right? So you have these grown men, very tough, old guys, and they've got 40 pairs of hands laid on them. And there's nothing but love aimed in that person's direction. Unconditional love. Like there's nothing in that moment. The priest is over their head and just praying for them, and everybody's hands are joined in with all of our intention for love, for the best interest of that person, aimed at that person. And I would watch these grown men just break down, and like having all that unconditional love just pointing in that direction. That was never something that they experienced, and they would just break down, and they'd be I'm sure they were transformed, at least to some regard. And that didn't happen for me. That did not, because I did have unconditional love from my parents. I had a really good upbringing. I had a really loving upbringing. But get to a part of the retreat where you have all the men who are running the retreat, who are these like CEO level. They're very, you know, from a hierarchy standpoint, right? They're you know, really renowned people, and these men are just getting on their knees and they're washing your feet. And in that moment, I lost it. I broke down, because that's what Jesus's love is, you know. Um, the one who deserves everything and yet goes after the sinner, because you realize in that moment how little you deserve. And but then the question flips on its head. Then the question reverses itself, because this is hard to put into words, and I'm going to do a really poor job at doing it. But if I believe that Jesus died, here's the way I'll try to do it. If you believe Jesus died for your sins, the question is, let's say, Chad, that you were the only person alive. You were the only person. Do you think that Jesus would still have died for you?
Yeah.
100%. And the same goes for me. So I believe that 100%. And so when we say Jesus died for our sins, I think what I did is I started taking it personally. So I started believing that Jesus died for my sins. And so the question is like, oh, if the Son of God died for me, there's a scene in Kevin Costner, Sean Connery, The Untouchables. There's a scene in The Untouchables where Sean Connery's like, "What are you prepared to do? What are you prepared to do?" And he says that to Kevin Costner, and it's like that. If I really believe that, if I really believe that Christ died for me, how does that change things? Like, what is that? You know, and and that's something that, and this is kind of my theory of, let's say, head and mind, head and heart, but that's something that starts here and then it slowly works its way down. And if you think of your entire psyche as an iceberg, where you're aware of the top, like what's going on at the surface, but really what Jesus wants is our hearts. And it takes a while for the shepherd to guide all the sheep in the right direction and affect that, but it's working from here down to our hearts, down to our very essence of our being. And we never truly get there in this life, but we can always strive to get closer. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I can keep going. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. May of 2018, I went on that retreat. September of 2018, I started rite of Catholic initiation in adults, RCIA, and had a great class. There was only like 2 people in the class, and there was 5 teachers, and one of them has a PhD, and it was like, man, I'm spoiled. But it's like I'm the weirdo who's joining the church. Like, everybody's leaving and I'm joining. Like, it's like, what? It's like, I don't like, but it's like, okay, if it smells like faith, and it's like at some point when I and Hersey Ali said, okay, like I started constructing my God and it started to look a lot like Jesus. It was like, if what I believe it is this, and if it smells and looks like it, then it's just hubris to not trust. Like fundamentally, it's about trust. You have to say, I'm never gonna get there. So one part of me is like, I'm never gonna be a perfect Christian. So it's like, oh, I can't even bother trying. It's like, no. That's not how it works. Again, that's not how it works. Like,
yes.
That's not like
a belligerent denial, to like actively. I know what that's like. Yeah. If at the end of of her process, she says nope, then that's just a belligerent denial.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like you really have to sell yourself on that, and that's, might as well just hang it up.
Yeah.
or give in. Either way, you're giving into something. So,
Yeah. Okay. So I start Catholic education and my depression is growing worse. I'm getting worse. And so when Peterson talks about, I didn't realize this till right after, till way after, but when you leave a tyranny, let's say the tyranny of secular materialism, and then you go into a desert, that's it. Because that period between, say, September of 2018 and November of 2017, like almost a full year, I was just deconstructing everything. Like I was like, man, there's so much of Neal that needs to burn away. Like there's so much that it needs to go. Like it's just like so much resentment and anger and entitlement and bullshit, and it needs to go. And man, that hurts. Like if that happened to me at 70, like I'd be done. Like I'd be dead. Like it's like thankfully I was 30. How old was I? I was like 32. But yeah.
So the tyranny you're talking about, I just want to say this quick. The tyranny you're talking about makes me the tyranny of the bondage of self.
Yes. 100%. Yeah, it's like my way, right? Is everything that like I thought was important for me.
Yeah.
And I had to let go completely and just say, I don't know what's important for me. I don't know. And like, then you're in a desert because you don't know.
Right. Well, that's because I noticed this happening that, and I learned this from my own journey into spirituality, is like you have all these different symptoms that we want to look at. It's materialism, it's secularism, it's whatever, it's alcohol, it's whatever. No, that's symptomatic. The problem is I'm selfish and self-centered, right? And so like if you can actually look at that honestly and know that being like the word selfish and self-centered, it's not a pejorative, it's just a fact.
Yeah.
Like it's like, but then you can start to yes, and the only proper place to go from there is a desert, because
like,
if you're
I found Christ, I'm cured, yay, everything's better. It's like nope.
You're self-centered like I am, and you just take me out of that and throw me into heaven. Wow, that's perfect. Guy like me, no, like when you're hopeless and you think you're really hopeless, you actually should probably be drained of every last drop of hope that you have for yourself.
See, I think of Peterson as my John the Baptist. I did not think of him that way at the time. This took me years to figure out, because when John the Baptist comes, every time there's a messenger before God comes, there's a messenger. And John the Baptist, like, make straight the paths of the Lord, make straight the paths of the Lord. And it's in retrospect, it's so obvious to me, because listening to Peterson in the months before November, I was doing the Petersonian stuff. I was starting to clean my room. I was like, oh, I'm the resentful one. Like I was just willingly and voluntarily fixing the things that I could fix in my own life as best I could, like stumbling uphill, as Peterson would say. I was putting things in order to a sufficient degree that God could make his move. And one thing I've contemplated is like, how could God also be like the humblest? Like how is it possible for God to be humble? And this is how. It's like the way I see God is I'm going to interfere the lightest possible I can to put you back on the right track. Like that's yeah. Like the like if I just give you a tap, and that gets you back on track, then that's enough. And Peterson talks about this in relation to kids. He's like, you do not do for your children things that they should do for themselves, or you only help, or an elderly person, you only help the person insofar that they are unable to do it for themselves. And that's exactly it. in that it's kind of like it is the least possible force. And because that when I was growing up, that was a big question of mine. It's like, okay, if Jesus is the Son of God, why did he wait so long before coming? So all the people before didn't get Jesus. And why was he only in that one little corner of the world? Like he didn't go to China, he didn't go to India, he didn't go to South America, he didn't go to North America, Native Americans, he didn't do any of it. Like why? Like what? And the answer that I've come to is that he came as soon as he could, as soon as we were ready, and he stayed as long as he needed to, but no longer. And and we weren't actually ready because we killed him, but we were ready enough. We were ready enough. We had the book of Daniel, we had the book of Job already written. There was enough. Yeah, and obviously I am projecting my own vision of biblical history into that, and I don't know what I'm talking about. So you can write all of that off. But like
Okay, no,
that, the humility of Jesus, as I see it, is in how and when Jesus came to earth. And it was just enough to do what like when he dies on the cross, it's like it is finished. Like he's done just enough so that we know how, just enough so that we know how the story ends. But he hasn't spoiled the story for us. He hasn't spoiled the rest of the journey that we have to walk ourselves.
thank
Not
God.
alone, but we have to walk it.
Thank God.
Okay, so I'm gonna I'm almost done. I know I've been
No,
going,
this,
Chad. We're going. Okay, so I mentioned, I've got my notes here. I'm looking at occasionally. So I mentioned that my depression got worse, and by 2018 came around November. And that was the 1 year anniversary of my brother's death, and that's when it was the worst. And I would force myself to wake up at 6 a.m. and I would shower and I'd go to daily mass for half an hour or 45 minutes or whatever. I'd go to daily mass, and that was sufficient for me to get through the day. And I would do it again the next day. I'd wake up, shower, go to daily mass. I could get through the day. And then after maybe 2 months, I realized I wasn't going to daily mass anymore. And I was like, oh crap, am I a bad Catholic? I'm not going to daily mass anymore. And then I'm like, oh, God made the mass for man, not man for the mass. God made the Sabbath for man, not man for the Sabbath. And I was like, oh, wow. It's almost like the church is there to shepherd and guide and help us. And so, but also around that time, okay, now we're getting closer to present day history for me in my own life. Also around that time, I had this crazy idea for a story, like absolutely crazy idea. And I knew that if I wrote this story, if it was, the best thing that could happen is the story would go nowhere, because it's the kind of story that would piss off everybody, like everybody. And I was like, I don't want to, like for months, I was like, I don't want to write this story. And it just, and it wasn't even a full story. It was just like, I had this structure, and it wouldn't go away. And I was like, after 2 months, and I was like I said, I was in the worst of my depression then, November. And I was like, all right, I'm just gonna start. And so I started in like November, December, and January. I started writing. I woke up, I forced, like I guess I stopped attending daily mass, and that first hour of my day I just dedicated to writing. Like I would go to work after, but I got to get up an hour early and I would just write, and then I would go to work. But I would do that. I did that for a year and a half, and I just kept writing and writing and writing. And at the same time, I was journaling like crazy. And also, like, I was still traveling a lot for work, and so I would use the time on my flights to read a lot. And I was like devouring Peterson's reading list. So I read like a ton of Jung, like a ton. And it's like Jung, like Jung. Like this is like a quarter of it. It's like, yeah. Anyway, I'll put it back. Sorry, Chad. You can cut this part. But I also read. Oh man, I gotta fix that later. Okay, but I also read. This is a really. I had to get this used. Hopefully, you can see that. It's The Discovery of the Unconscious by Ella Berger. Ellen, that was also on Peterson's reading list.
Yeah.
This thing is long. This took me a while.
Was it accessible?
No, I had to buy a used copy.
No, but like the reading
Oh,
of it, was that accessible?
yes. Because it went almost historically through, starting with this guy named Janae Pierre. But it went historically through like how you got to Jung. It was like the author wanted to understand. To me, it felt like the author was just trying to get to Jung and Adler, but he wanted to like paint the trail to get
Yeah.
there. And one thing that I learned about in that book was this idea called a creative illness. And I had this sense as I was like in this depression that because I was like, I had a level of creativity that I had never had before. I had like all these ideas coming to me. And I had this sense that it was tied directly to my depression, and that I I had this like industrious sense that like I have to use this. I have to like I just like every day I was like powering through. I was doing things. And that's right, because I don't have the same desire now, not even close to like just pure ideas and go. Like it's like it was a directly inverse relationship to my psychological well-being versus like how creative I was. Like those two things were directly inversely related,
So
which
in
is
other
really
words,
yeah.
your spiritual well-being, could you call it that as well? Like versus psychological well-being, or kind of one and the same?
I think it was more like I was rebuilding a new map. And because if you think of yourself as an iceberg where so much of what was under the surface had been burned away or had been stripped away, and so it filled it, there was this giant void, and like all these new things were just like flying into the void from who knows how thoughts arise. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. Yeah, they just arise and then they're there. um but during that time, and I talked to you a little bit about this before, but during that time I was journaling like crazy, because like I would have all this resentment and all this anger kind of like bubbling up in my depression. And the journal for me became a means by which I wasn't lashing out or expressing that to the people I loved in my life. Like I was able to pour all that resentment. And so I'll if I go back to those journal entries now, so much of it is just like resentment, like bullshit, just me, just yeah, I just like hate it. Like I'm just like, oh man, I'm like it's just rotten. But like amidst all the crud, there are these like glimmers of gold, and like really like like I said, it was like a really creative time amidst all the spewing of garbage. And so eventually I'll really go back and try to sift that, but I haven't felt compelled to do that. Yeah, I think later on in my life. Um, so anyway, so I'm writing this thing, and I've almost done with it, and it's March of 2020. Like I started, and I become Catholic Easter of 2019. So I officially am welcomed into the church, and the following Easter was canceled. So I saw the hand of God in that as well. And then I'm getting to the point where my daughter's like 3.5 years old, and she's like, every time I leave on a business trip, she's like, Daddy, don't go. And then all of a sudden COVID hit and I wasn't going anywhere. So that was March of 2020. The other important thing was, as I was writing this thing, I was like, man, I had already written a book, a story in my younger years. That's another tragic event in my life that inspired me to do that, which I'll talk about at some point. But if we continue this relationship chat, which I hope we do.
Yeah.
The but as I was writing it, I realized nobody reads fiction anymore. Not to the extent that they did, that they used to. And the reason for that is we have so many more mediums of art conveying of story, basically. So we have cinema and we have TV shows and all that. But then as I was writing the story, I was like, oh man, this is best conveyed as a role-playing game, as a video game. Because when I was a kid, there were so many games that I played, that the story was phenomenal. Like some of the best stories I read as a kid were actually in games. Like there's this one called Baldur's Gate 2, where came out when I was like 13, but it has like 200 hours of beautiful story and subplots and all over the place, and just like awesome villains. And
Wow.
anyway, but I realized as I was writing this, it's like, oh, this is best construed as a game. And when I was in college, I tried majoring in computer science. So my father was a programmer. I tried majoring in computer science, and I got a B plus in the intro course, which a lot of math majors struggle with. So I'm like, yeah, I'm doing okay, B plus. And then you get to the next class, which is called data structures, and then I get a D, and like half the class gets a D or an F, and I retake it and I do all right retaking it, but like I'm just like, this isn't for me. Like I couldn't translate what was on the screen to what I wanted, like the actual language. I couldn't translate that to what I wanted the system to do. And so as I'm writing this story, so now I'm fast forwarding. So as I'm writing this story, I'm like, oh, this is best construed as a game. Like, what if, like, I don't make games, like I don't program. That's not. And then I'm like, okay, I have to try to learn how to do that. And so we were in the middle of COVID when I finished writing it. And I was dreading finishing writing it. It was like May 2020. I was dreading finishing writing it because then I was like, the only thing keeping me out of my depression maybe is there's this creative, Peterson talks about, if you're creative, you have to express that creativity or you'll be
You'll
in the
die.
depths. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly how I felt. It was like, and I was like, oh man, so once this story ends, like what am I going to do? And so I was dreading two things. I was dreading, one, it's going to be too complicated. I'm not going to be able to learn it because I failed in college already. And the second thing I was dreading is like, okay, maybe I slowly am able to figure it out, but maybe like I just hate it. And if I hate it, then what? Like what? But again, it was me trying to control. It was me trying to be like, oh, like this is mine. And it was just, instead of just being open and being like, okay, what's up? What's next, God? Um, and so I started trying to learn, like first I was researching different game engines and I narrowed it down to Unity or Unreal Engine. And then I decided, because Unreal Engine looked more for like it looked better for like the big sweeping games that I wanted, that I thought I wanted to make. And so I started to learn it. It took like a month to learn the simplest thing, like how to switch out a character, like how to switch out your main character with like a different character. It took me like a month. And I shouldn't have started there, by the way. But and then but like as I was doing it, I started to really fall in love with the process, like the process of like figuring something out. And I imagine it's like the way a lot of guys are with like cars or other stuff. It's like you fall in love with the process of doing it. And so like I started to really love it. And but then another thing hit me, which is like, okay, Neal, like you might be able to make a game, but like no one's gonna care and no one's gonna, so what? And then simultaneously in my job, when I was a full-time employee, I used to teach a lot, and that aspect of my life was gone, and I was really missing that. And I was like, oh, and so when I was finding tutorials online for how to do game development, you'd have guys that are like really charismatic online, like, hey, we're going to learn this. But the problem with the charismatic guys is you could tell after a couple of minutes that they were full of shit and they didn't really know, like maybe they knew the basics, but they were just charismatic and they didn't know. And then there were other guys who were like, okay, guys, this is a Niagara system and we've got particles and they move in an XYZ vector and da da da. They were, monotone, but they knew what they were talking about, but they were very, not easy to follow. And I was like, I'm definitely not nearly as knowledgeable as these guys, but I think I'm getting to the point where I'm more knowledgeable than these guys. And I think that I could teach fairly effectively. And then so when Unreal Engine 5 came out is like April of last year, April 2022, I was like, okay, here's my chance. So I'm going to start a series. And I did the series on like how to build like kind of the exact kind of game I wanted to actually make. And and that's been my channel and my experience. And
Wow.
but also so I think, sorry, I'm going to tie this back to TLC and then we could take this in whatever direction you want. And I know I've taken up way more time than
No, this is great.
I'm sorry, Chad.
No,
Uh, yeah. Uh, so I think what happened with me compared to like a lot of people in TLC is that so when Peterson around that 2018 mark when Peterson when I'd finished the Genesis stuff and the stuff coming from Peterson was like second wave, but he hadn't yet had his like real problems where he was out of commission for a while. Um, I still had I am very individualistic to a fault, I would say. It probably comes from that upbringing where I was an only child really for 10 years. But I was still in the like when I finished writing what I wrote that was like a faith testimony. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, I know all the secrets. I've got to share this because I've got to share it because other people could benefit from my wisdom. And there was another part of me that's like, Neal, you don't know shit. You need to STFU and like you're just starting out. And thankfully that part of me won. But then I was back in the desert, after that. And that's what led to my my lowest point where I was attending daily mass and then but ultimately led me to writing this new thing and ultimately led me to game development. So I would not have begun doing this new thing that I love unless I had basically gone through that desert first or experienced that desert where yeah, like the suffering was, I would say, necessary, really necessary. um and another thing I would say, Peterson's always said he's never seen anyone in their life get away with anything. Every bit of my suffering, every single bit was I would say deserved. I would say deserved. Even if it wasn't deserved, which it is deserved. But even if it wasn't deserved, I would say it's necessary. So it taught me if you keep looking up and you keep being open to what comes, the suffering will unveil opportunities that you do not expect in paths that you do not expect. So for me, I was still, I would say, I was like, I have no right to really talk about things I don't understand when I was still midway in that journey. So I didn't really feel the need to join a community or anything like that because I was journaling like crazy. I was in like the full creative mode. And I feel like a lot of people at that time, that's when they came together as a community and helped each other climb slowly, like hobble uphill to Christ or some better outcome of wherever they were. Um, and how do I want to tie this back to TLC? I remember decorating this room in the beginning of 2022 when I was getting ready to start my YouTube series on building a game. And um, I remember that was the point where I was just binge listening to PVK, Pajot, Vervaeke, uh, Sevilla King, um, man, all the people. Oh shoot, navigating patterns. But
the
um,
meaning code.
the meaning code. Yes, Karen Wong. Sorry. Um, yeah, and I was listening to all their conversations, and I was getting deeper and deeper into it. And that was about maybe a year and a half ago. And I probably started commenting a lot, or not a lot, but at least a decent amount on PVK stuff maybe a year ago. I started like feeling like I understand the corner well enough. And then it was about 6 months ago that I started really getting to know like I knew about 6 months ago that I wanted to become more participatory in the corner. And the it you have an intuition about these things in that like
What do
there's
you think?
and Jung, wait, one last thing is that Jung Jung always, and Peterson says this too, it's like any desire that you have or any interest you have, it's never fully pure. It's never fully pure. So there's a part of Neal that's like, oh yeah, I'm going to talk about this and I'm going to get more subscribers on my YouTube channel, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
I should hate that part of me. Like I should hate it. Like I don't, but and with the corner, it was, but there's also a part of me that's like, okay, this has become my best means of it. We are building maps of meaning. I said this to you, but what we are attempting to do is, instead of this purely secular materialist naturalist world, we're basically saying, okay, the world is not that, or whatever the world is far bigger, far more mysterious than this secular materialist world. So with that understanding that the world is far bigger, far more interesting, how do we rebuild our maps of meaning and understand what I mean? The secular person would say maps of understanding, but what makes us all unique within the corner is that we understand that meaning is more foundational, more elementary, more important than, let's say, this. Like we are first in a subjective lens. Like we are, no matter what, we are in the subjective. And so we first have to navigate from that point of subjectivity in best we can. And so as the corners become more and more important to me, I've become, it's like, participate in what you believe in. Like, or St. Paul would say, we are all Christ's body. And to the extent that it helps me make sense of my world, and I mean that subjectively, then I'm sure it does the same for other people. And so to the extent that we can become guideposts and markers and able to help one another and love one another in that way and build a community from the ground up, like, whew. Anyway, so I realized that I wanted to get more involved, and simultaneously I wanted to begin to share, the things I've learned about making games or struggling to make a game, and how that maybe has helped me redefine understanding the arena and stuff like that. But anyway, I meant what I said earlier, Chad, about just seeing you as earnest, but someone who is as carefully trying to take that beam out of your eye, and stumbling uphill and doing it, just not worrying about how you're seen, but instead just worrying about doing what is right in Christ's eyes. And quite frankly, I just wanted to be your friend. Like I was like, this is someone that I'd like to be friends with. And also doing it playfully, like the playful nature, some aspects of the corner are not as interesting to me. I'll put it that way. And but you have a sense of play about you that Peterson also has, that I love it. Like the stupid jokes and the, yeah, like you don't take anything too heavily. Like, yeah,
Well, it's expensive sometimes. Yeah. And there are certain times where it's necessary, but mostly I'm just like a clown. So like, what do I know anyways? So how could I take it too? So I have an illness, and it's called seriousness. And when that gets to be too much, it can be, that's where all my illness lives, is in my seriousness. Now, there are times, obviously, to have serious conversation or to seriously listen to somebody or things like this. But I also have an issue with balance, So all of the times in my life where I've been in the most trouble, I suppose, at least in the last, let's say, 10 years, has always been when I have this rigid streak. And then the sheriff in you steps out and is like, you sons of bitches. Like, what do you, and so that's what I meant by seriousness. And like, so I've had a couple moments in my in my adventures here in the corner that were where I wasn't on my best behavior, and those are always in very serious moments. And so yeah, how could I take my like so? It's weird because like it's interesting like that when you're saying, oh, you're earnest. It's like, okay, I'll I'll accept that, fine, but mostly like um mostly I know I get a very very strong sense that I'm doing something wrong, and like not that my soul is in peril, but that I don't know, there's just something off about where I'm at, and like so the earnestness is trying to not uh to, not to give up. That's it. That's the earnest. I refuse to give up on the journey, right? Whatever it may be, and like part of that is come from the recovery. It's like the best you get to be is human. So stick around, sunshine. You know what I mean? It's like, and so while doing this, there are just some simple principles that I have to try to stay tied to, especially. Okay, how do I put this? If I'm not doing these other things in my life on the ground, boots on the ground here in Wisconsin, I can't do this, because you'll say something like you're earnest, and the first thing that'll cross my mind is I'm a piece of shit. I should just go jump off a building or something. You know what I mean? Because
Child of God.
yeah, right. You're a child of God. It's like, no, I'm not. Because I know me, and you don't really know me. So like I have to. That's why. Maybe that's what people say when people tell Peterson you're so courageous. He's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I'm just afraid of the right things. That's kind of what it is for me. It's like, you don't understand. I'm not earnest. I just I know the truth about me. And I don't want to be crushed by 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 a compliment when I know the truth about me. So no, I don't expect myself to be perfect, obviously, but I think it's weird. So um, so let me ask you this: what did you think it would have been like um, to actually have like be Catholic, or to be a family man, or and a Christian, and all this stuff? And I'm still kind of getting used to saying I'm a Christian, only because I think there's a little part of me that's still tied up in the past about that. But mostly it's that I know the truth about me, that I don't live up to it. So it's whatever. But so what did you think before all that happened? What did you think about let's say the people that were the Christian family people?
I thought they were naive. I thought they were, let's say, simple and more boring than me. That's
Did
what
you
I
think
thought.
that they were happy? Did you think that they thought that their lives were easy?
No, but I think I thought what I thought about them was that they were just, following the footsteps of those who went before and not knowing any differently. And there are certain, yeah, I'm sure there are Christians who are like that. They do it because it's expected of them and they haven't known any other way. And what's interesting about the time that we're moving into, though, is that the people, all the societal, and this is probably more true in Europe, all the societal pressures are now on not proclaiming your faith, not being a Christian, at least not overtly. And so what that means is that the people who remain in one way, you think, oh, you bemoan what's happening to the church with people leaving the church like crazy. But on the other hand, what's happening is that the people who remain, they really believe. They're there because they believe. They're not there because it helps them sociologically or for any other reason. So it's a really interesting time, and I share PVK's fear for the future, in that there's always a desert after something like a tyranny, or and it's rare that things go from good to better.
Mhm.
And that we have it really good right now. We have it really good in a lot of ways, and I really do value the wealth of, let's say, antiseptics and running water and electricity that works. All the things that Peterson said is a miracle. Like, he's 100%
Yeah.
right. And but I don't know. I'm not really answering your question.
Oh, I,
It helps for me to have gratitude, and yeah, I suspect if we talk more of that, a lot of that will unfold, in our
yeah,
conversation.
yeah. I just what I'm kind of getting at is, like, I think I had this naive notion that the Christians, that if I was to be like those Christians, it would just be easy. If I could just be
Mm.
like, life would be easy. It'd be just so much better, and I wouldn't have, you know, not necessarily that I wouldn't have problems, but like I would, I don't know, there'd be some.
There is this. I'm probably getting this wrong. So let me preface that by saying I'm probably getting this wrong. But there is something that I've gathered from Catholicism, that those who suffer the most are sometimes, perhaps often, perhaps almost always, those who suffer the most are the most loved by God. Um, Protestantism, in my experience, does not have a good answer for suffering, at least the tradition I was raised in. Um, the tradition I was raised in was more, and this might be more of just me being a child and not really delving deeply into the mythology, and not the mythology, the mythology of Protestantism. I'm going to get roasted for that. Oh, that's going to be a bad one. Luckily, it's way down the conversation. Nobody will probably listen this long, but the uh, in the tradition that I was taught in, there was not a whole lot about, here's suffering, you're going to suffer, and here's what it means as a Christian. There wasn't a lot about that. It's like, God is love, and we've got Jesus, so you don't have
Yeah.
to worry. It's like all light, and you know, and the Catholics, and I really, when you posted that video on Saint Bernadette, I started listening to that. I'm like, wait, that's my wife's saint, right? And then I went over to the kitchen, uh and I was like, hey, that's Saint Bernadette, your saint, right? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, that is weird that Chad posts Saint Bernadette. That's really weird. And anyway, synchronicity and Jungian terms. But I I think often that Christ gives us, it's like that humility thing. He gives us precisely the load that we can carry to help the most people. I don't think it's about the suffering per se, but I
Right.
think if you think about it from Jesus' standpoint, if God could give Jesus a little bit more suffering in order to save a few more people, would Christ take that on? And I think the answer is yes. And the same applies to each of us. If God could give us a little bit more suffering that we could willingly accept to help, not even save, I'm just going to say love or help other people.
Yeah, because we can't save. I don't
No,
think.
no, not at all. I think that's
I
an,
have to
yeah,
thank him
yeah.
for my. That's how I put it. I actually think I have to thank him for my faith, because like, are you kidding me? Like, this is the
No,
last thing I'm looking for. You know what I'm saying?
it's grace all the way. It's the primacy of grace is something that's said within Catholicism. I think of grace as God reaches out first, and then we have to take the hand. He still gives us the choice. My favorite line in the prodigal son, my favorite part of the prodigal son. The parable of the prodigal son? Yeah.
Yes.
But my favorite part of it is, it says, when he was still a long ways off. It says, when he was still a long ways off, the Father goes running out to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's our life. That's our journey. When we are still ways away, that the Father goes running out to us. And the journey is still suffering often.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I was watching this thing today. Upcycle sent me a video of this Hungarian dude who's giving his thoughts on ARC, and he kind of lays out this idea about it's not necessarily like it's not like the integral color scheme thing, but it's in it's the U-shaped journey, but the U-shaped journey mapped onto the almost like integral, like what the stages of personhood, let's say. Maybe that's a good way of putting it. And so do you see this?
I know the U-shaped journey pretty well. I understand that. I don't understand the yeah.
So it starts like this. We'll say the beginning of the story starts up here, okay? And he says it starts at conservative, not politically, just a conservative, and that's the way, obviously.
Traditional.
Yes, I mean, even if your tradition is like your parents are drunks and whatever, you know, or you're born into whatever it is,
conserving whatever exists. Yes.
Yep, conservative here, and then you start to break out of that, and as you said, you break out of that tyranny, you go into the desert, which is liberal freedom. It's like, and like these, and or what he called woke, which is to become awake, right? And of course, obviously, you're awake, and you're waking up in a desert, you know, and you're free to do whatever you want. You are not in a domain of freedom, by the way. You're just that's, I think, the difference between free and
you could see all the sins of the world, let's say, in that place. You see, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're usually plagued by resentment, so you're looking back at your conservative past, or where your past is, because that's where resentment lives.
Yeah.
And then that's all driving your fear, which lies ahead. And so you're just kind of stuck there a little while. And so what happens is you go from there to into the stage of suffering, right? Now, all the while you kind of were suffering, but here's where you actually, when you're at the bottom, you pick up the cross and you decide, I will suffer.
It gets worse before it gets better, but that voluntary, I understand.
Right. So like when I go into detoxes and I try to deliver the message there to these people, like I never want to give them some flowery bullshit message, because it is stupid. It doesn't work. And like, I want to try and be as honest with them as possible. It's like, listen, there's no suffering. There's no way of getting around suffering. They're always going to have it. Now you can suffer pointlessly, or you can suffer with a purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the journey. That's the U-shaped journey, right? It's like, you're like, I'm experiencing thrownness. Oh my God, you sons of bitches. And then get out of here, and then, you know, and fall into the desert, and you're like, this is great, until you're like, I'm suffering pointlessly.
I apologize, Chad. I got a hard out, because I do at 7 p.m. every Friday. I do Eucharistic adoration. It's basically do a weekly examine. So I got to run. But I would love this to be a regular occurrence, where we talk, and instead of it being like me, you know, like obviously a conversation. So
they're gonna love your story, and you're gonna be the new hot chick in the corner. So
for a little while, maybe. Thank you.
Much appreciated, and God bless you, my friend.
God bless you, Chad. Talk to you soon.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.